the Europeans are just another example of a group of people just can't keep their damn hands to themselves. Stay at home, fix your own countries. Instead, they're constantly meddling, whether it's in Ukraine or now trying to wade into the war in Iran. Well, and I understand why Europe, at the heart of it, Europe depends in large measure on a lot of the oil that comes out of the Persian Gulf. And they're not getting any now. So they're facing a structural shortage. They've cut off their supply from Russia. And now the supply is cut off out of the Persian Gulf. They don't have a lot of good alternatives to turn to. So, I think there has been a lot of, I'll call whistling past the graveyard over the last couple of weeks. Trump insisting, oh boy, we got all this oil that came out on Tuesday. Yay, the oil crisis is over. It's only beginning. And there is an enormous disconnect between the future markets and what the actual supply and price that people are paying. The ship pulls into port and what they're paying to get the oil off the ship. So it's, I think we're not going to know the full weight of this. It'll be about a week and a half before it really starts to hit. If the experts that I've been listening to are correct. Now maybe they're wrong, but I don't see how they are. I don't think we don't have some secret source of or reserve that we could fall back on.
Yesterday, Scott Besson was asked by Fox News reporter about the Strait of Hormuz. He said that, no, whatever they're talking about in the Strait of Hormuz is something like what we've heard with the Baghdad Bob, and this is Tehran Tim.
Yeah.
What the Strait, Larry, since last night, because we've seen new footages coming out of the Strait that IRGC is in total control of the Strait. They were using various lines, close to the Omani border. Somehow they thought that that's not going to be under the control of Iran. But right now it seems that they're dominating the Strait to control everything.
Right.
And that is not acceptable for the Trump administration, at least what they're talking about right now.
Yeah, you can go to there's a website called marinetraffic.com. It shows real time what's going in, what's going out. Right now, just north of in the most narrow area that's between Bandar Abbas, Kemch Island, and the tip. Let's see what this is called, a Kasab on Oman. There's not a single ship leaving. There's one coming in. It's called a Chinese-owned vessel called One Force. It's heading in, but the only ships heading out are there's one called the YC Pansy headed out to, I guess, India. And so, yeah, no big. There are a couple that have just, they just got around the nose of Oman, so they go. They're now headed out into the wider towards the Indian Ocean. So you got one. Looks like that's going towards Pakistan and India, Chinese, Singapore, and China. So the thing, and I'm just counting them up here. The ships that are passing, almost 90%, 95% are going to Asia. In fact, I haven't seen any that are going to the United States, none going to Europe. So that's quite telling. The volume of traffic coming out of the Strait of Hormuz is about 1/5 of normal traffic, and so the problem the world faces right now, particularly with respect to heavy crude, is that 20% of the supply was shut down. So what happened is countries around the world, the United States and Japan and China, others, they had petroleum reserves. They did have a sort of a rainy day fund. So they started drawing those down. And I guess in those reserves, there are always a mix of what you call light crude and heavy crude. And the heavy crude is the critical one because that's what's used to make aviation fuel and diesel fuel. The problem you run into is the refineries, when they're making the product, they can't make two at the same time. They can't make diesel and aviation, I'm told. They have to either make the diesel or make the aviation. They can, and I'm not sure how the process for switching over from one to the other, how difficult that is, how time consuming. That's a question to be asked. But what has happened is, if you go back to the 28th of February and say you had sort of a set demand here for diesel and a set demand here for aviation fuel. So, the market was supplying what was needed for the demand. The combat operations start against Iran, so that aviation fuel demand all of a sudden goes way up, and it stays up for 4 months. As a result, and at the same time, you lose 20% of your supply. So it's like saying that you need to eat 1,000 calories, but you've lost 20% of your food supply, so you have less food. And they've been able to paper that over until now. But while combat operations are over, the demand for the diesel, for the aviation fuel, has not gone away, but the supply does not meet the demand, which means there's going to be a tremendous, significant spike in prices coming up, which the United States is already reporting high inflation. The inflation has gone up, and it's going to just further exacerbate that. So, this is not good news for the world economy.
Yeah, comparing before February, Larry, it was something like 125 to 138 ships per day.
Right.
And right now is less than something like 50, 40.
Oh, less. It's not even 53. It's not even that many. It was probably between. In fact, oil tankers. On Tuesday,
I think we have tankers going in and coming out.
Well, the tankers that came out the other day were 7. They thought possibly 12, but 7 to 12. Well, that's a long ways from 125 a day. So yeah, this is there is some movement, but it's not sufficient to restore the global supply. And then on top of it, you've got the claims that the strait is mined, and the U.S. Military told Congress in April, it's going to take 6 months to get that free. But we've not heard any reports of ships hitting a mine and blowing up. So I wonder if that was just if that was a disinformation campaign, that there was no truth to that.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Larry, Mark Rutte is in the United States, and the guy is somehow, it feels like he's I would say, Trump's brand salesman.
Yeah.
The guy is so much in the hand. He literally feels that Donald Trump is his daddy. And here is what he said in the White House.
Stay here. I go over to these boards here because I want to show you what this president was able to achieve. And I start with this chart. This chart is about the Trump trillion. The Trump trillion shows you the increase Europeans and Canadians are paying into defense since you took office in 2017. Trump 45 plus Trump 47. A total of extra spend by the Europeans and the Canadians of 1.2 trillion. When you look at the effect of Trump 47, so the isolated effect of the extra defense spending in 2025 and in 2026, you see almost $140 billion extra spend nominal on defense by the Europeans and the Canadians. And also this year you will again see an increase by about 120 billion, which brings a total in 2 years of over $250 billion. I can assure you, this is because of Russia, because of the threat, but I'm also absolutely convinced that you being President of the United States, being consistently pushing for something which since Eisenhower has not been achieved, which is the Europeans equalizing their defense spending with the United States, this is your evidence. Then, when it comes to jobs, look here. In total, 195,000 jobs being supported by investments. Investments from European companies into the United States, 83,000 jobs supported by that. 112,000 jobs created by the fact that Europeans are massively, about half of all their defense spending when it comes to defense industrial output is spent in the United States. 112,000 jobs. Last year they spent $54 billion on US defense industrial output. There is now an order catalog, an order backlog of 300 billion. So $300 billion of defense spending from Europeans, buying this in the US over the next couple of years, which is already on the order book. Last year 54 billion, a total now order book of 300 billion, totally almost 200,000. These are real jobs, real people like you.
Jesus. Man, I thought that, you know, I've never I've never seen such a display of sucking up in my life. That's embarrassing. You know, what do you say to that? This is, you know, we don't have leaders who are able to sit down and, you know, talk candidly. When you have to come in and like a organ grinder monkey, perform like that, dance around and tell Trump he's the greatest of them all.
Since Eisenhower, nobody was able to have such a great achievements in the United States.
Yeah, let's step back and again look at the reality. There is, you know, we've got a nation. Actually, it's not just a nation. It's not just the United States. It's Europe as well, just built on a foundation of lies, one lie after another. Both, you know, the lies we tell about Iran as an enemy and about Russia as an enemy and about the great successes of Ukraine and about the military prowess of the Israelis. You just, you know, at some point these lies will catch up, and you know there'll be a reckoning. Hopefully, the problem with reckoning sometimes those who ought to be held responsible aren't. They get away with it.
No. Larry, 2 days ago, you know, on June 22nd and June 23rd, we had India hosted the 16 BRICS National Security Advisors, NSA, and high representatives on national security meeting in New Delhi. And the participants of that were Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Indonesia. And today I talked with one of our friends of this podcast, Pravin Sani. He said that the meeting was important in terms of the security and the discussions that have happened, but at the margins of the meetings, the main meetings, the margins were more important, more mainstream than the real one, than the principal one, which was the meetings that China had with other countries. And considering what's going on, you know, with the case of the Security Council, with the case of the security of Eurasia and what's going on in the West Asia, there was a meeting between Iranian representative and India as well, considering the new reality of the West Asia. Looking at BRICS today, Larry, do you think, is there any sort of need for BRICS to find its path toward something like SCO to be, because BRICS is bigger than SCO. It's somehow
Right.
it's more important than SCO. How do you see BRICS going or merging somehow some activities or some goals in that direction?
Well, I think ultimately they're going to come together. It's going to be driven, though, first and foremost by the economics, and it's the economics where I think we've seen the greatest acceleration in the integration of these countries. My understanding is that over the past 6 months, you've had 26 additional banks sign up to be part of CIPS, the cross-border interbank payment system that China has created as an alternative to SWIFT. You're seeing that with all of the oil that's now coming out of the Persian Gulf from Iran, it's being sold in Chinese yuan. It's not being sold in US dollars, is my understanding. So I think I know Pepe was concerned about this. This meeting is a prelude to the summit that's going to be held, I guess, in September in India. And because of Modi, the Prime Minister Modi's actions just prior to the war with the attack on Iran in February 28th, because Modi was in Israel. He was in Israel acting just like Ruta was acting with Trump. I mean, Modi was doing, "Oh, Bibi Netanyahu, you're so great. Let me rub butter on your ass. You are the most wonderful man in the world." That kind of stuff. And really sort of humiliating himself and India as a country by appearing to be so subservient to this, to Israel. Now, apparently there was no joint statement released out of this meeting, but I guess a public statement by India was very supportive of the Iran-U.S. MOU. So they didn't, they weren't trying to tear that down or criticize that. So just the fact that these countries are meeting and talking is a reminder that there is an alternative to the U.S.-led international economic order, which is now, I think, in the process of dying.
With the case of India, Larry, before the sanctions in 2019, they were dependent on Russia, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Iran. But right now, since Iran was under tremendous sanctions from the United States in 2019, and you see they tried to replace Iran with Russia, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, UAE. The United States is sending oil to India as well. You have West African producers to India. But the problem with the Strait of Hormuz is that the strait is hitting India as well.
Yes.
They're basically,
well, didn't Iran made some exceptions early on in the blockade policy to allow ships out that went to India, didn't? I seem to recall that, back in March and April.
Larry, you mentioned how important it is for, the two organizations, SCO and BRICS. But when it comes to the case of, basically, with the case of Gaza, with the case of Palestine, which UN has totally failed to help Palestinian people. And we have reporters coming, these organizations, human rights, and these organizations coming out and talking, but there is no action coming out of those talks.
Mm-hmm.
There is no pragmatic, sort of solution on their part. Do you find it the new reality in the region, is that going to help BRICS or SCO to maybe participate, to have a better role with the case of Palestine?
Well, I would hope so, but we haven't seen any. The only indication we've seen of someone willing to engage on the issue of Palestine now is Iran, and the promises that it will be addressed in the course of these negotiations on implementing the MOU. The problem I see is, with Trump, Trump is making more statements today saying he's taking a, quote, tougher line with Iran. Iran showing no signs of caving at all. And then you had Iran, they did fire on another ship last night that was not responding to Iranian commands. So they are asserting control over the strait. And, they've had previous statements emphasizing they're working in tandem with Oman. Yet the Omanis came out yesterday, basically independently said, okay, if anybody wants can sail through this lane on our side of the waters. And Iran said, no, that's not going to happen. So, there is would appear to be a bit of a friction point, at least with Oman. I'm not sure how serious that is at this point. But Iran's control of the Strait of Hormuz, despite the U.S. protestations, is just going to be a reminder again of the limits of U.S. power. And so Iran, I think, is going to be playing a bigger role within BRICS. And I don't think Pakistan is currently part of BRICS. And the Saudis say what?
Pakistan is not part of BRICS.
Yeah, it's not part of BRICS, and the Saudis are sort of on the edge. They're not sure whether they want to be part or they don't want to be part. They're trying to figure that out. Yeah. But once you get to a stage where if Pakistan decides to join BRICS, then this is going to be it'll be a serious signal to the West of declining influence throughout the region. And I see coming out of that you'll move towards what you were talking about earlier, that out of the SCO, out of BRICS will emerge a security function. And see, remember that both Russia and China have been talking about this new security architecture in the Persian Gulf, and Pakistan's been playing the leading role in developing that. So that's where we can see a situation where you've got a coming together of Pakistan ultimately getting into BRICS. I think that may be where they are headed.
But Pakistan is a full member of the SCO, Larry.
Yeah,
that is important. I don't know what is the reason that they're not part of BRICS, but SCO is as important as BRICS. I think the hardcore of BRICS is SCO.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that I would assume that's because of Pakistan's long-standing relationship with China.
Because looking at the SCO, we have China, Russia, India, Pakistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Iran, and Belarus.
Mm-hmm.
So you have India and Pakistan, both of them in the SCO, which we know the friction between the two sides, and being part of the a security structure, which is the SCO. So that I don't see any sort of problem for them to be part of BRICS. And maybe they're receiving some sort of pressure from the United States not to be part of BRICS, because they're so much connected. Basically, the military in Pakistan is so much connected with the United States.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, this, I don't think Pakistan is under the kind of control or influence of the United States is I think is popularly perceived. And I had this discussion the other day with another podcaster, Suleiman Ahmed, that I think the let's call it the public view is that Pakistan is a lackey, it's a vassal of the United States, and the United States says jump, and the Pakistanis will say, well, how high? But I don't think that's it at all.
Yeah,
it has been and I'm drawing back on my experience as an analyst of of Honduras and during the wars with the Central American wars and particularly the war on Nicaragua. There was the U.S. had viewed Honduras as this inferior, stupid, not very bright country that we had under our control, and that they'd have to do what we told them to do. But the reality was, out of that arrogance and disrespect on the American side, is the Hondurans were they were sometimes running circles around us on certain issues. We'd think we'd have an agreement to do X, and they'd be doing Y. So I see in Pakistan that being done on a much broader level. It is true that during the 1980s, Pakistani truck drivers and businessmen profited from the U.S. covert operation against the Soviets. A lot of people made money off of that. And then in 2003, when the United States, in 2001, after we go into Afghanistan to go after Osama bin Laden, and then bin Laden escapes across the border and is in Pakistan for the next, 10 years, 12 years, that the United States needed a lot of supplies in Afghanistan that they'd come via ocean container, get offloaded in, say, Karachi or the other port, and then be trucked into Afghanistan. So those truck drivers, they made a ton of money off of the United States and hauling that kind of equipment. So this it was never the United States liked to think it was in charge, but the Pakistanis controlled. They controlled the logistics in effect. And I always maintain logistics is the key to any of these conflicts. So here we now got Munir, and yes, Munir ousted Imran Khan.
Yeah.
And Imran Khan was, he's a Trump-like figure, populist, popular. He was a